This video we're going to create one simple RESTful web application using JAX-RS, and we'll perform some of the CRUD operation on that object using JPA. Okay, so the tools we here we are using like wildfly application server, and we are using JDK 17, and we are using for the database we are using mysql database. Okay, so the main important thing is that here we are using like JPA for the persist your entity. I mean from your application to the database. So we are using Jakarta Persistence, and there is two things here like JPA Persistent context and the entity manager. Okay, so when you're creating the persistent .xml file, I will show you in the example. When you create the persistent.xml file, there itself you need to mention the persistent unit name. So basically the persistent context is act as a like fast level cache which is interact with your data source. Okay, so all the entities are fetched or saved by this persistent context. Okay, but this entity manager is injected by your container. So basically this basically act like a connection to the persistent context. Okay, so you can perform all the operation to the database through this entity manager. It have all the methods like persist, merge, and delete. All these methods are there, so you can use those methods and perform the operation to the database. And here you have like two different options are there, like how we can inject this entity manager instance. So you can use the application managed entity manager, or otherwise you can use the container managed. So here I'm using the container managed entity manager. So basically this is injected by your container, that is the wildfly application server. So we no need to create entity manager using the entity manager factory and create the transaction like that. Those of the things is not required. So we directly inject in our managed bin. So basically if you are using this EJB, so that time all the methods are by default the transactional method, but in the managed bin it's not transactional. So we need to annotate all the method with like so update method, create method, we need to annotate with the transaction. So this is the basic things we're going to cover these things. And first thing is that we can create one sample application, RESTful application using Maven. So you can use this command like your package name and the archetype and the simple Maven application, Maven archetype web app, and this one. Okay, so I already created those application and imported to, yeah, so from my local environment I already created that one. You can see the structure, one POM file is there and src and the target directory is there. Okay, so let me import that to the Eclipse. Here you can see that folder is imported to Eclipse. You can see here JAX-RS, and under that I have created some classes. So basically I need to perform some of the operation on the object, that is the customer. Okay, so I created one customer class, that is the entity class. You can see here. First we'll cover the POM file. What are the dependencies required? If you double check this POM file, you can see one dependency I have added, that is the Jakarta EE Enterprise Edition having version like 11. Okay, so these are provided by your Wildfly because they implemented this Jakarta API. So basically these are provided by your Wildfly. Okay, and I am using Java 17, you can see, and the final name is like JAX-RS. Okay, so this is the simple pump file, and I close this file, and then we can jump to create one sample file, that is entity. I'll show you this one. Yeah, I have created one package, that is com jt JAX-RS package name, and under that package I have all the files like entity file, that is customer.java, and the customer endpoint, basically the REST endpoint are hitting to this file, and one repository file is there to perform the all the entity manager kind of things, and this is the activation of your JAX-RS. Okay, so let me discuss this one. You can see the entity class is annotated with entity, and I created one named query. So basically this named query fetch all the customer details. Okay, so I defined one class, that is customer, having attributes id, name and surname is there. Okay, so similarly all the attribute and the table names should be exist in the database. Okay, from the Java side you can create this class, and all the setter getter methods you can use. And one more important thing is that for the ID I'm not going to insert the data to the customer ID. This is act as like customer ID. We are not going to insert customer ID, we leave it blank. Okay, so that the so that this your database will automatically insert this value using some auto increment things. Okay, I'll show you those part. So I already connected to my database, mysql database, and here you can see I created one similar things like customer table, and in customer table whatever fields are there like id, name and surname is there. I created id integer and name as varchar and also surname as varchar. One important thing is that you need to add this extra things. Okay, auto increment, so that we no need to add this value. We need to pass only whenever persist this customer object, so that time we need to uh, pass only name and surname. This id will automatically generated by this auto increment. Okay, so this is the entity class. So after that we have another thing, that is the repository class. If you check this class, here is the important things that, yeah, basically this class is persisting all your data from your application to entity, the database. Okay, so the important thing what we have discussed just now, that is the persistent context. Okay, so this persistent context is injected by your entity, this container. Okay, so here we are using wildfly as container. Okay, so where we need to define those things, database connection related things. Okay, so here one file is there, that is persistent.xml file. You can see the path, it should be placed inside resources, otherwise it should not work. Okay, if you check this srcman resources meta-nf, you need to create one directory like meta-nf. Under that you need to define persistent.xml. okay, here we need to define the persistent unit name and your database JNDA name. Okay, so if you check my previous video, I already created how to how to create one data source in the jboss. Okay, so you can follow that one, and only we need to pass this JNDA name here. Okay, and the database is pointing inside this application server, that is the jboss. It is pointing to all the details like whatever the database you are using, like database host, url, password, username, password, and what is the database we are using. Here I am using orgdb. okay, you can check my previous video. Okay, so important thing is that I define one persistent unit which is pointing to this data source JNDA name. Okay, so I can use this persistent unit in my application. I'll show you how to use this one. Here in the persistent context annotation, you can pass the unit name. Okay, so this is optional, you can leave it blank. If it is one persistent unit defined inside the persistent.xml, you can leave it blank, so that it will automatically resolve to that single one. Okay, And once you define this persistent context, the entity manager instance is injected by your container. We no need to create like entity manager factory, and from that factory we create the entity manager instance. Those manual things is not required when your entity manager is managed by the container. So once you get the entity manager instance, then you can perform all the operation on the entity using entity manager. So they have like methods are there, like entity manager to create named query, and whatever query we defined here, the customer dot find all, the same query we can reference it here, create named query like that. Okay, and get all result. This is basically find all the customers are fetched using this create name query, this one, and the type is like customer dot class, and get all result. Okay, so similarly we have like find by customer id. We can pass the customer id, and the entity manager can have getting this details from the find methods. Okay, so similarly the update methods are there. In the update method, basically we need to pass the the customize customer object. Okay, so first it will check that a customer is exist or not. Once it exists, then we'll update the customer, and once it is updated, then we can merge with the persistent storage. Similarly for create customer and the delete customer. So delete time we can pass the customer id, then we can jump to endpoint. Here is the rest endpoint. In the rest endpoint you can see first it goes to this path, that is customers, and there we have like get all. So it will basically get the instance of the customer repository whatever created just now. We can get this instance using inject. Okay, so this is the CDI features, like a container dependency injection or something. So basically these are injected by your container itself, like the spring we have like the spring bean are injected like this way. The same way we can inject this any class object using this inject in wildfly. Wildfly means these are the Jakarta EE implementer. Okay, so here we have like get method and post method, and put all the operation we can perform, and respectively we call this repository dot find by id or create customer or update customer, like that. Okay, these are the simple one REST endpoint, and it produces the JSON file, also consume the JSON file, and this is simple bin CDI bin. Okay, so that we can inject this. And the customer you can the customer repository, when is interact with the database, that time you can see all the methods are annotated with the transactional. Basically it is required for the update, create and delete. Okay, so when the method is annotated with the transactional, the entity manager or the persistent context will create one transaction when you're invoking this method, and it will close the transaction on the last of this line. Okay, so this is basically how the flow is, and we'll going to test all these things. Okay, so let me yeah, so let me run this command maven clean install. It will produce the war file. Now we can see the build is success. Okay, build is success, so that it will generate this war file. And if you check this target directory, you can see this var is generated. Okay, so we are going to deploy this var inside application server, that is wildfly. Okay, so let me start this application server. Let me start this application server. I am in path of this wildfly bin, and I'm going to run this command standalone.sh and -c. This is profile is like standalone full. So you can see that JND name, database JND name should be coming. Yeah, so we need to figure out that one, otherwise we can check from the console. So let me access this console. HTTP localhost 990. Here you can, from the runtime itself, you can get all the details. Data source. Here you can see one data source already defined, mysql data source. Okay, so you can check out my previous video. You can get all the details how to configure this data source. Okay, so here we are going to deploy this application. Here you can see that application not there, like just JAX-RS. So click on this icon, offload deployment. Here you can choose your final jar file. You can see the final jar is available under the target. You can select this one, war file, open, and click on next. Then click finish. It will deploy your application. Now it is successfully deployed your application. Then after that you can close this one, and if you want to get the details in the view, you can see the context path is JAX-RS. Okay, so now we can access this application and test all the CRUD things. Okay, like using curl. Okay, so let me, yeah, so I can use this prompt. First let me try to get all the details of customer. Okay, so since there is no customer exist, it should not return anything, but let me try this one. curl-s, your deployment, that is the JAX-RS, then rest. You can check all these things from here. I'll show you. This is the JAX activator. You can see rest is defined there. Okay, the first is that you can access this context route, that is the JAX-RS, then rest, then come to your endpoint. Okay, in the endpoint it is mentioned customers. Okay, so that's why the path is similar like this. Okay, so I'll show you the path. Yeah, so first is your context JAX-RS, then your application endpoint, then your customers, that is the defined in the endpoint. You can see there is nothing coming. Okay, so let me create one object and persist into the database. Okay, so similarly we can select the database also. Is there anything? Select star from customer. There is no records available right now, so let me insert some of the records. Okay, so for insert you can use this command, post method. Okay, curl post method, and here curl -d your data, that is I'm going to pass two fields, that is the name and surname. Leave the first field, that is the ID, blank. It will be automatically incremented by or managed by your database. Okay, then header, in the header we can pass like JSON application slash JSON, because in the endpoint file you can see it is showing like produces also JSON and consumes also JSON. Okay, so that's why it can consume the JSON. So I can pass the header like application slash JSON, and it is type post and your endpoint. Okay, so this endpoint will hit I think Yeah, this one, it will hit this one. Okay, post method. So now it's success. If you fetch the details again, you can format this using jQuery. Yeah, so now you can see all the details like id 5. The id is automatically generated and incremented by the database, so that's why it is a random number, I mean some number is coming. Then the surname and the name is coming. So similarly, if you want to create one more record, you can Smith 3 and John 3. Yeah, so if you get the details, now you can see two records are coming. Okay, so now we can perform the test of this put method. So how to edit this file? Okay, you can use this command curl. So basically I'm going to edit the existing one. So when you edit the existing one, so you need to pass the id. So here I'm going to edit the second one, that is id 6. The name should be like X-Men and X-Men 1. Okay, so let me save this file. Okay, so again I can check this details. So now you can see earlier the record, existing record like John 3 and Smith 3 is renamed to like X-Men or X-Men 3 1. Okay, so I'm going to also perform the last operation, that is the delete operation. So I'm going to delete this file, I mean delete this record. So that you can use the delete API call. I'm going to delete. This is a query parameter, that's why the question mark, your name and value. Okay, that is id equal to 6. Okay, so if I fetch again the details, you can see only one record is showing. Okay, let me quickly search by customer id. Let me enter few records. Okay, same record, and get the details. Oh, I think it's a put method I used. Let me use the post method. Yeah, post method, and let me check the details. Here we have two records are there, so I can search by the customer name. Okay, customer id. If I pass that is the path param, I search by 5 customers. You can use the jQuery. Yeah, you can search by specific customer also. Okay, so this is all about how to perform the CRUD operation using the persistent JPA, I mean JPA, and how to define the persistent APA. I mean how it is performing the CRUD operation to your database using wildfly application server JNDNM. Okay, yeah, that's it.